Hi, I'm Larry Reed, and you're listening to the Libertarian Christian Podcast.
Welcome to the show that gets Christians thinking about faith and politics. Get ready to challenge the status quo, expand your imagination, and tackle controversy head on. Let's stand together at the intersection of faith and freedom. It's time for the Libertarian Christian Podcast.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast. This is a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute, and you are listening live via Crowdcast to episode 100. I can believe it, but I can't believe it at the same time. This is great, and I'm really glad to have some of you who have been our loyal listeners, followers, and people we've corresponded with over the years joining us. It's interesting that I'm calling this live because you're listening to this right now, but at the same time, you're not a crowd in front of me. Maybe for episode 200, we'll somehow have a crowd or something like that where we can have an event. That would be pretty awesome, I think. I just wanted to welcome you all here. This is pretty awesome. There was one thing that we were going to do to start the episode, and that was to have a video by Larry Reed, who is going to be the opening voice of our podcast for 2019. It's already been recorded, but I actually learned last minute that we were unable to actually produce the video for you live on this, using this platform in the way that we have it set up. So I will link to that here when I get a moment. We'll put it in the notes, and I'll kind of leave it for you at the end of the episode. We put it up on YouTube. It's just a really short message, Larry wishing us the best, but I'll leave that for you to watch. I want to thank everybody who donated in 2018 and even in the past, and who donated even actually this month, January 2019. We thank you so much. Your generosity helps us do what we do. It helps keeps the podcast running. There's a lot of things that we're doing, and there's a lot of things that we're planning, and a lot of things that we're going to be releasing in the coming year. And it takes a lot of support to do what we do. This podcast in particular takes a major effort from a lot of people. We have a team, Jason Ring Productions. He has a team of people, and one of them, his name is Keith. I'm going to call out his name because Keith has done an amazing job editing our podcast. He catches things and my mistakes. I mean, he makes me sound better. So we want to thank people like Keith, who just makes this podcast even better. We have Matt Bellis, who is the opening deep voice that we have been using for all 100 episodes. Matt is a friend of mine who lives locally near me, and he's just got that perfect radio voice. So thank you, Matt. And of course, we have Bob Murphy and Jeffrey Tucker also do our intro voices in the past 2 years. And so kind of our plan is to kind of each year just update the voice, and maybe we'll see who we have each year. We might open the floor to audio chat for those of you who have a microphone and want to ask a question or give some sort of testimony about how LCI or libertarianchristians.com has helped you in your walk as a libertarian or as a Christian or both. If that's something that anybody wants to do, we'll certainly open that up. But what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to get our guest on. And he's actually really not a guest. He's actually the co-host. It's Dr. Norman Horn. I mean, we're going to talk about the founding of LCC and how it became LCI and how we led up to, doing this podcast and, all of that. So, I mean, come on, we have to have Norman on, of course. So we're going to get Norman on here. And that does take me just a few moments. All right. And we got it. For the first time ever, we both have video. So it's incredible. We'll keep that up for just a little bit, at least. So now you know where I record.
Yeah, it's a much better looking basement than my own. And this is where I record too, all the time.
This is where you record. Yeah, this is how a lot of meetings at LCI take place. Over
webcams, funny microphones, and basements.
People ask where we're based, and we say everywhere.
Basement.
So Libertarian Christian Institute started as libertarianchristians.com. And every time you tell this story, you always say, in the wake of the Obama election, you had to found an organization or a website. You had to start writing about this. It's just part of the story. So we just hit 10 years in November of 2018. And now we are at episode 100. This is kind of a nice coinciding happening here. So I'm going to let the screen get focused on you, and you can tell a little bit of why did you find, well, we can keep it both up, I guess. Why did you found LCC? How did that start?
If we're going to talk about the founding of LCC, we really should talk a little bit about what came before, because a lot of it comes down to why I became a libertarian in the first place. And to even go to that point, we kind of have to do a shout out to some, ancient history in some respects, namely that, what my parents taught me from a little child was to be a person of character and a seeker of truth. And what I found as I when I was an undergrad in particular, I think that we'll go through quickly this part of the story, but I started reading articles from the Mises Institute about economics and ethics, really being spurred on by the growing relationship that I had with the family of the girl who would become my wife. My wife, Caitlin, her dad introduced me to these articles and just wanted to get my opinion, and because it was interested in the free market. And even though my future father-in-law wasn't exactly a libertarian, he had an appreciation for Austrian economics. And what happened was that I got really interested in that in particular. This is the study of economics, and as I grew in that, I began to discover this thing called libertarianism, and in particular the writings of Murray Rothbard. So what happened then is that about a year after that, we got married. We moved to Texas, and I started graduate school. And the effect that this had on me, reading these articles, continuously over the past year and a half or so, was really that I began to realize that a lot of the arguments that I had against libertarianism itself, or just liberty as opposed to what I had previously held, conservatism, the arguments that I had for libertarianism I could argue against myself and win every time with liberty. And that process did take some time. What was a major factor there, though, was that there was sort of this latent problem that kind of Christians would have with libertarianism. There was this, dare I say, not to toss around the word lightly, but kind of a prejudiced effect, because there's sort of an expectation in kind of Christianity. If you're a theologically conservative Christian, that often goes along with political conservatism. And if you're all here and our listeners, they know that that's something that's kind of intrinsic to what happens in American evangelicalism on some level. But nonetheless, there are a few things that kind of won me over. One was that again, I was taught from a very young age to be a seeker of truth, and regardless of where it led. And in fact, my mother, who's here, can attest to this. That when I did kind of out myself as a libertarian, and really what had kind of happened there was that I remember actually specifically being at home with Caitlin, and I put down my laptop, or I think it was my laptop, reading some articles or whatnot. And I told her that, I have better arguments for liberty and libertarianism than I do for conservatism anymore. Everything that I thought, that I could answer with conservatism really is better answered with libertarian ideas. And when I talked about that initially with my parents in particular, and they found that funny, again, my mom can attest to this in particular, since she's here. I told them that, look, you guys taught me to be consistent with what I believed, and what I'm telling you now is that I believe now I am being more consistent with what you taught me than what I believed before. Period. And that was really, that was an important point. The reason why this is important is because from then on, I kind of had this sense in my brain that there needed to be a resource out there to kind of help Christians along in this journey toward understanding libertarian ideas. And that's even why, you'll see in the the sort of inadvertent quote that gets it's been memed a bit and whatnot is, this is why I say that, libertarianism is the most consistent expression of Christian political thought. That has a very deep meaning to me. And it's for these reasons: caring about truth, going wherever it leads, and saying no to ideas that are just flat out incorrect, and not going, bowing to the crowd, not joining up with the mass, but dealing with the self-evident truth and the scripture, no matter what. And so, and as you can see in the chat here, Mom is attesting to this once again, and this even had an effect on my parents, and for what it's worth, they're both, my mom and my dad and my brother, and even to an extent my sister, are all involved in this now too. And this is that's the story. So starting LCC really comes down to that. It came down to that kind of history of family and of truth seeking that I know that every one of you who are listening now are also on that journey. So I hope that's a bit of encouragement for you. Getting started with the site itself, of course, was a little weird. I had never built a website before, but I could go through the technical details, but that's not the important part, right? The important parts are things like why, how, and what were the circumstances therein. In particular, as Doug mentioned earlier, it was all in the wake of the Obama election in 2008. And I just felt like it was time to do something with what I had already written. I had already written a ton of articles, even won some awards for my exegesis and of Matthew chapter 4 and Romans 13 in papers and whatnot. It had been published in a couple of different places, with some of our friends. Many of you will know, and so following, starting the website, it got some kind of cool attention from folks like Tom Woods and Bob Murphy and Peter Klein, and that was, it was really helpful to have that early bump, if you will, in some of the popular things that I had written.
Norman, your mom is interrupting or making a comment here that's really a good foundation for you. She taught you never to trust the government.
That's true. Well, and they demonstrated that to us in so far as like they refused to put us in the public school system even. And we started homeschooling and to be fair, like that's not necessarily for everybody. And I don't want to necessarily say that it is, but it was important for our development. And that was a really important piece there, to kind of, that spurred on our education in the right way. And so it was really important for us. And so I'm really grateful to all of my family for the effects that they had on us in every respect like that. It's really important, and we can't discount that. And and for what it's worth, everybody here has their own family history, and hopefully there's plenty of it that you can look back to and say, thank the Lord for what the effect that they had upon me. And someday, my hope for you is that if by the grace of God, you live a long life and see your family change and to better and better things, then you can look back and say these types of stories about them as well. And so I hope that's part of that's something that you are blessed with. So for what it's worth, we talked about starting up in kind of the early LCC history, some of the early publicity that we had. And it took, a number of years for us to really get to the point where it made sense to say, strike out and go, well, maybe it's time to expand even bigger. And a major focal point of that was the desire to, from a lot of people and the feedback that we received to host some type of physical event. And so that's when we started the Christians for Liberty conferences back in 2013. And that was really fun to do. We had a great time doing that. It's also incredibly difficult. We did that for 3 years straight, and my goodness, it was really, really, really hard. And so we haven't done one in this year, and we're kind of looking toward what that's going to, what these types of things will look like in the future. But nonetheless, the CFL conferences were kind of the focal point of where we were kind of gunning for a renewed organizational impetus. And that is where we kind of started this idea of, okay, we're gonna actually turn this into a 501c3. We're gonna make this, and for what it's worth, kind of like a think tank of sorts, and focus on content creation and things such as that. And so, we did that, and one of the interesting little pieces about that is that a number of organizations that you've probably are aware of, groups like Students for Liberty or Young Americans for Liberty, which, by the way, those guys, the heads of those organizations are both friends of mine, Alexander McCoben, and then former head of Young Americans for Liberty as well. Both of them are friends of mine, and they helped encourage me and get kind of give me some advice in getting started. And whereas there was that the kind of the scandal a number of years ago about how certain elements of the administration were kind of blocking certain organizations from getting their tax exempt status, and to where it took them over a year. In some cases, like I think YAL took over a year to get their status, and similarly for Students for Liberty. We got our 501c3 status by the grace of God in 2 weeks, and we have the documentation to prove it. And so that's kind of another little funny piece that kind of got us started there. But ever since then, we've been just trying to understand how best that we can fit into the current space of liberty organizations. Our focus now is really to work on our mission work, if you will, that's declared in our mission statement, that we are here, we exist to train the church to be presenters of libertarian ideas, that we care about equipping the church to promote liberty. That's what we're here to do. And so rather than we're not just to serve the libertarian community, although that is definitely something that we do. We are here to help you as fellow Christians go into the church and equip you to promote liberty within your churches, within your fellow Christian brothers and sisters. Make that important to us, and to kind of move away from this idea that the state is the savior, of course, even though that people don't want to say it that way. But you and I both know that is definitely something that is prominent in in American Christianity, and even throughout the world as well. We don't want to neglect that either. And so we're grateful for all the support that people have brought to us, over whether it's financial or just sharing our content or helping, write articles, any of that. We're so grateful. We're also especially grateful for those outside of the country, like Paulo, who's here today, and for the many people, and we have some, demographic data, or really just some geographic data that shows that, libertarianchristians.com has been read in over 100 countries in the world every year, period. That's incredible. We're not even banned in China yet, if you can believe it. But that's incredible, and there's so much to do in the world to promote the cause of Christ and liberty, and we're we want to be at the vanguard of that, and we're thankful to have that opportunity through this organization personally, and we're thankful to be able to just serve you in that way.
So Norman, one of the teases that we sent out in an email, or maybe even on our Facebook page, about coming to this live event is that we would get to hear some stories about some of the insiders scoop, if you will, of what you experience, things like cutting your chops on the Live and Let Live radio show.
Sure.
With the real Gary Johnson. So there's some other things that I think we can talk about. Would you like to give us some juicy tidbits of what it was like? I think This might have been before I even knew you.
Yeah, definitely. A number of things. There's a lot of funny things that have happened over the years, and some of which I'm sure I've forgotten. But there are definitely some cool things. One of the great pleasures that I got to have early on in the in the construction and promotion of the site was the grand support of my libertarian friends in Austin, Texas, where I was a grad student at the time at University of Texas, and I worked with the libertarians out there in kind of some smaller, some larger activist efforts. So, for instance, as you alluded to, there was a radio show called Live and Let Live. It was nationally syndicated. I mean, and you could of course stream it online. And it was hosted for years, and it's no longer running anymore because the gentleman is stepped down from it. But it was run for years by this guy named Gary Johnson, but not the Gary Johnson who was the LP candidate for two presidential elections. This is a Gary Johnson who was local in Austin. He's a wonderful guy. He's super friendly and is very experienced on the radio. He's a wonderful man, and we like to joke around, in Texas that that he was the real Gary Johnson, because he was part of the LP actually long before the Gary Johnson former governor of New Mexico was. And Gary's, like I said, he's a wonderful guy. And I kind of became one of his backup guests when he had, somebody back out on him last minute. He'd call me up, and so I'd hang out with him on the radio. And it was great because I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do things like that in the past. And if you've never done radio work before, it can be a little weird when you're going live on these sorts of things. And so it was great to cut my chops on Gary's show, and just to experience that, and to be able to having him give me the opportunity to talk both about the work that I was doing with LCC, and then also the stuff that we would do with the libertarian group on campus that I worked with and headed up for a number of years, called Libertarian Longhorns, which was now kind of, I don't think that it really exists anymore, which is kind of sad, but that's the way of student groups, and but it was a wonderful thing to do. So that was really cool. There's some other things that are kind of even, I would say, even weirder or more unusual. I remember actually one of the funny things that happened very early on was that I ended up getting some emails from some of our international friends. One in particular that was weird. Well, I shouldn't even call it weird. It was actually just rather fascinating. It was from a group in Malaysia who were basically wanting to understand, as a small church in the area, and they had been reading a number of materials out there about how should Christians understand the state, because from their point of view, their government at the time was not being very, very friendly to them. And when they're reading this material from America, that's perhaps a bit more complimentary of state action, and they're reading things like Romans 13 and going like, we don't know how to deal with this anymore. I mean, we hear our brothers and sisters in America saying one thing, Paul is saying this. This is very confusing to us, and so actually corresponding with them via email about how to interact with the state in Romans 13 was like, oh my goodness, talk about fear and trembling right there, right? That was weird. That was the weird part, but very fascinating. Another little known fact about LCC and LCI, and all of us here as Christians will recognize the importance of this, is that the unintended consequence, in a good way, of what we have here is that occasionally libertarians who are not Christians stumble on our stuff, and they start reading, and they begin to learn more about God, and then they, the Lord works in very interesting ways here, and sometimes that leads them to attend a congregation and grow and learn more, and they become Christians almost as a indirect result of being exposed to this work. And that is really exciting. It is not something that I ever thought I never thought that was possible in this sort of scenario, but it's definitely something that now that I've seen it, and we get a couple emails like this every year. It's not a ton of them. I mean, obviously we wish there were more, but there's not a ton of them, but it does happen. And so it kind of always is now in the back of our mind about, what is this effect going to have? Or what is this article going to say about us as Christians to the people who are libertarians out there who are not Christians? It's an interesting kind of sub point there.
I remember my first email where I got, basically it was the first email that was sent to me, and it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember it distinctly hit me because I hadn't really thought about the impact we were having on libertarians who would become Christians. And this was a little bit different because this person was raised a Christian, considered himself a Christian, but then kind of was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, because he kind of learned a lot about politics and economics. And he's like, I can't be a Christian. If a Christian believes this, I'm not going to say which side of the fence he was on, but if a Christian believes this about politics, I can't do it. And he came across libertarianchristians.com. And at some, I don't remember amount of time later, he was like, oh, well, if I can be a Christian and be a libertarian, well, I didn't realize that could be compatible. And we helped him kind of blend those together. And so in this sense, we actually helped him from sort of leaving the faith. And that hit me because I had conversations with him and I didn't realize it. Actually, you know what? I just realized that I did not get an email from that person. This was when I met this person in person, and he shared this with me over lunch. And I just remember being stunned and being like, wow, this is really awesome. So that was my memory of it. And it really is a really good feeling to kind of hear that we are having an impact on people. It was the first impact that it had on me.
Hey, the last story I wanted to share actually was something that if you perhaps are slightly newer to LCI/LCC in general, there are a few events that stand out in my mind as being, pretty amazing in the way they came together and how important they were, at least in my mind, as to like how much fun they were to do and how interesting it was to participate in them. And those in particular are the debates that we've been invited to. The first one actually, which happened, oh man, I think this was back in 2013. So it's been probably on the order, it's been about 5 years, I think. Was a debate at Patrick Henry College with the Wilberforce Society. They were the invitees. Or rather, they invited me. And the invitees were myself and a guy named Alan Carlson of the Howard Center. And we were debating about essentially the government definition of marriage. And it was amazing to do. The best point in the debate, and you can still find this video somewhere. There's moments in it where I'm not exactly pleased with my own performance per se, but I think my favorite moment there was, I had prepped really hard in trying to read what Alan Carlson had wrote or what he had written on the topic of marriage and government in various ways. And so I came prepped hardcore with his own work. And I was pretty sure that because I was, I'm the young upstart kid, I doubt he's going to read my stuff and the things that I've written on the topic. That's fine. Whatever. He's the luminary and I'm the young upstart. So, but what I realized in my preparation was that I could make arguments from his own work to support my position and debunk his. And so I did this. And during the debate itself, I made this presentation and Dr. Carlson said during this, I think his words were something akin to, I don't think I've ever had someone argue against me in a debate using my own stuff. And that was pretty hilarious. The second one, of course, and as many of you know, was the debate on the Up for Debate radio show with Al Mohler, which was from, I believe that was mid 2016. So we're going on 3 years. I think that was in like March or April 2016. And our good friend JJ kind of got that set up, or he kind of suggested it to Julie Roy's the host. And man, what a crazy afternoon that was. Oh man. But it was amazing to be able to do that. And, I have great respect for Dr. Mohler as a theologian, not so much in terms of his political thought per se, but it was an honor to do that and to be able to present that on national radio. I guess there's one other final story I think is pretty cool, and a number of people probably have. If you're newer, you may not know this, but roughly the end of 2012, I was actually invited to write an article for the Washington Post, and one of their kind of closely knit websites that was called On Faith, and about Ron Paul and Christian libertarianism and how those kind of relate together and whatnot. And I would be so bold as to make this statement about the result of that article. After that, we began to see an uptick in a lot of major publications, things like Christianity Today, Relevant Magazine, and others as well, talking about Christian libertarianism. Perhaps this is not the humble way of thinking about it, but I'd like to believe that article from the Washington Post had some sort of effect there, because it was. And it was commented to me by some of my non-Christian libertarian friends who have regularly read what I've written. And he said, like, this may be the best piece we've ever seen you write. And I'm still very proud of that piece. I think it's great. You can find it on our website. On Faith, that website has kind of been more reintegrated into the Washington Post proper at this point. But I think it's still, a really good piece to kind of go back to and see some, really cool effects from. And I think that's some pretty good stuff, right?
I just pasted a link to so that was 2011.
Oh, 2011.
Late 2011.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, as you'll see there in that link, yeah, it was late December.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Excellent. You were in that debate. You were in those two debates, and I remember seeing the Patrick Henry College one, and I remember listening live to the one with Al Mohler. And so that brings us roughly to the present. So the incorporation of LCI, I'm going to kind of jump back into that storyline and say, you wanted to create something that became an institution that equips Christians and equips the church. We were kind of talking along those lines. And I think it would be kind of important to highlight some of the major ways in which we've done that. Now, articles is a big thing. I mean, we do lots of blog posts. We've done an enormous amount of blog posts in 2018, especially. But what are some of the other things that maybe our listeners don't know we provide just because they've either never visited our site, or maybe this is like the first episode they're listening to? So there's a lot on our site. So of course we have the podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, you already know of its existence. What else is there?
Well, we have our YouTube channel, of course, and we've got some interesting material up there. We've just kind of started up a new little series that we're calling LCI Hot Takes, which is it's just kind of short videos on the order of about 10 minutes, where I'm just kind of riffing on things that are happening in the world today and thoughts that I've been having. It's kind of supplementing our articles on somewhat with something a little more light and just trying to kind of give some extra variety to everyone in a more informal setting. And so, there's that. And then we of course we do a lot of interesting, kind of republications of articles as well, trying to preserve, good materials that have come, from our forebears in Christian libertarian thought. The Edmund Opitz archive in particular is a great resource, and other things as well. And then we've also been more recently trying to step up our promotion of a variety of books. And one of those in particular is the book called To Freedom, which we're very pleased to have been involved in that production. And in fact, we're actually in the process of releasing the audiobook of that. And that's going to be coming out here probably in the first quarter here of 2019 on Audible. And we're very excited that that's happening. And we got a great plan in place to get that moving. And then, of course, we do give away materials too, and there's something I know that you have in store for our people here. Yeah. So for those of you who are live, we have your names. So we have your name. We have your names. We have your email. I don't know if there's anything else we have about you, but we have, because you registered, not because of some nefarious scheme. No, it's because we're tracking everyone.
We're tracking. Yes, we have cookies on our website. That's about it. Yeah. Okay.
We don't know how to use them.
So Norm, I'm going to have to put the video on you for us to show it. But basically, we have a free book for you, for everybody. And you ready?
Yeah.
Ready or not, here it is. If we can
copies
here, let me focus it on the screen here so it's on the right thing. There we go. Okay. So Christian Theology of Public Policy by John Coben.
By Dr. John Coben. Coben, who's this book is a wonderful man. I can't say enough good things about this book. John Coben.
Turn it sideways to show them how thick it is.
Oh yeah, it's big. Just thick as my head. No, this is a great book. And if you've never heard of John Coben, he's been thinking about these ideas for a really long time, and has done what I would say is one of the best analyses of Romans 13 that you'll find out there. And this was a book that I found extremely helpful in my development as a libertarian thinker, and in particular on how we think about theology and libertarianism. So we've acquired a number of copies of these, and we are going to be giving them away to all of our attendees here. So Doug, tell them how they can make sure and get their copy.
So if you're listening to this right now, you know that you're going to get this free book, and you can email me, and it's Doug@libertarianchristians.com. Let me know that you want it. If it's something you already have and you want to give it to a friend, just tell us their address. We'll send it to them. Just let us know. Let me know, and then I'll give Norman the list. He'll mail them out, and that's how it'll go.
So thanks for being here live with us, and we just wanted to express that thanks to you.
Did you know that we also equip you with clothing? Being a little facetious here. So for those of you listening after the fact, I'm basically on our website for those live viewing. Basically on our website, we have a resources section. And in that resources section, there are a number of things that we provide. And one of them is a starter kit. There's a list of articles, and there's a frequently asked questions. We have a humongous page of libertarian resources. You can click on all of these links. But about halfway down the page, there's a Get a Free Starter Kit. What a starter kit is it's a series of emails that you'll receive. You enter your email address. You will be added to our mailing list. If you're already on our mailing list, this will just trigger that the mailing of the starter kit will start. You'll get something once every day for, I believe, 10 days. And then if you fill out a survey about it, you will get a PDF version of it at the end. That's basically how this works. So libertarianchristians.com/resources. And we did not promote it because we launched it right around Black Friday weekend. I think that's actually when I got the store up live and running. And I didn't want to promote it so much that we had people order things that didn't get them in time for Christmas. And so I was really kind of hesitant to promote it. And I wish we had promoted it like a month ahead. I wish I had gotten everything up a month ahead. But basically, if you go to libertarianchristians.com/store, you will be able to download you will be able to purchase for download our Christians for Liberty 2017 conference, which was done over Crowdcast. You can get the entire conference or for $8, or you can buy the individual sessions at $2 a piece, which would be $10 if you bought them individually. And in reference to what I said earlier, that we will clothe you, well, you kind of clothe yourself because you're buying these, but we have a hoodie sweater that is just absolutely comfortable. I have 2 of them. And so I've practically lived in these things for about a month and a half now. We have T-shirts. Jesus is Lord, but Caesar is crossed out in the T-shirt. Again, libertarianchristians.com/store. We have the State is Not the Kingdom of God mug and T-shirt. And we also have the Jesus Not Caesar is Lord mug. So anyway, and we will have some more stuff.
Today is that reminder.
wearing my hoodie.
Wearing your hoodie and drinking coffee and saying the state's not the kingdom of God.
Yes.
Which, by the way, the state is not the kingdom of God was the first tagline of LCC, incidentally.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So
there are limited number of old business cards for LCC out there. There's probably I probably still have some somewhere around here, but
right. Okay. I gotcha.
Maybe I'll throw one in as a bookmark for you guys.
Yeah. So I got the video up now, and this is the LCI hoodie. And of course, it's comfortable. You can tell because I'm smiling on video camera, telling you it's comfortable. So that's proof, of course.
That's proof, of course. Yes.
Yeah, they're just amazing. So anyway, all that to say,
good stuff.
Go buy something.
it'll support us, and you'll get something really cool out of it. And they're super
yeah.
quality stuff, man. They're great.
Yeah, they are. I will say that there are two types of hoodies on there. One's a little more expensive than the other, but the more expensive one is really, really, really comfortable. I don't know about the other one. I haven't seen any reviews on it yet, but they're good material, good company too that we're using to make these. So enough of that. So go buy stuff. So we have resources in a number of ways. We have a podcast. We have our blog and where we have our articles. We have regular authors who write for us from around the world. And we're just really thrilled with the team we've been developing over the past year. And
it could even be said. It could even be said that the sun never sets on LCI authors, because we have LCI authors in Europe and in America and in Asia. We have one in India. It's amazing. It's so cool.
Yeah.
So
we're building an empire. Not our plan is what? Take over the world and leave it alone.
Take over the world and leave everyone else alone, right?
Yeah. So okay. So enough fun.
Yeah.
Well, this is all fun, I guess.
But speaking of our podcast,
different kind of fun.
Something. Yeah. But speaking of the podcast, though, this is, of course, episode 100. And one of the things you got to do is you got to kind of have a retrospective on the podcast itself, right? And what are we doing about that? What do you got for us, Doug?
Yeah. So I don't know how much insider baseball, whatever stats you want on things, but we have this podcast is at first it was like, we could do this. It's pretty easy. And I had this, when we first started, I said, we're not going to actually release any episodes until we have 4 recorded. And
right,
because we want to make sure that, because I'm like, we got to come up with a schedule. We want to do once a month. No, we're going to do every 2 weeks. No, we're going to do once a week. We decided on that. We decided we can pull it off. We decided on a minimum time, and we decided on, we didn't really decide on a maximum time. We kind of decided on a target, and that target was about 40 to 45 minutes. And so we recorded 4 or 5 sessions before the first one was actually released. And that gave us a nice lead way. And only about 3 times have we come up with the week of, we're like, hey, we got to have something this week. And so out of 100 episodes, we were always kind of a few ahead. We've even managed to have like a whole month off of recording because we got them done ahead of time. So we just schedule with our guests and with each other the conversations that we want to have. We want to keep things as evergreen as possible with what we're discussing. Although, one of the earlier episodes, I started it with the Pope pissed me off. And so I'm like, we got to have somebody on to talk about some of the stupid things he was saying. And so we did it like very, very quickly. I think that was a Jeffrey Tucker episode. So there's just a number of things that go into the podcast, and we have to send it to our audio guy, and then we have to review it. And then I make sure it gets scheduled at midnight. Does anybody know that it actually schedules on well, it's technically Monday, I guess, since it's midnight on a Sunday evening. We have aimed for this. We haven't hit every one, but we've hit every Monday. But pretty much at midnight on Sunday night, we release it. That helps those in Europe get it in the morning. But I'm on the East Coast, if anybody didn't know. So I just choose East Coast as my midnight time. And then we post it on our website on Tuesday. So those of you who subscribe will get it, the first day. And then we announce it on Facebook and everything else on a Tuesday on our website. So it's been a really interesting and fun ride doing it, because I get to talk to a lot of people that are authors of books, and I kind of say this is like, I get to ask them the questions that I want to ask them, and they come on the show, and I get to ask them questions that I'm like, I don't really write in the margins of the book, but if I had written questions in the margins of the book while I was reading something like that outraged me, or I'm like, really? I don't know about that, or something like that. I get to ask them these questions. So I'm like, this is great. But there is a downside to this. I have to limit the amount of books that I read. A lot of books every year. And so I can't read every book that I really want to read, because it's going to take, like, the podcast the books that we read, that I read for the guests on the podcast, it kind of takes priority. And so there are a handful of books on my shelf that are at the bottom of the pile because there are some at the top of the pile because of guests. And that is partly, and there's a little bit of influence in that as to who becomes a guest. So there's kind of some cross interest there. One of the things that we have learned about the podcast is a lot of you who listen to this love to listen to us talk about conservatism and libertarianism, the core values of libertarianism. What does it mean to be a libertarian and think, or be a Christian and think about economics? The things that are more in the kind of moral framework kind of realm. So some of the top episodes of 2018, and these are episodes that were only released in 2018, are things like conservatism versus libertarianism, libertarian Christian core values, the moral superiority of capitalism. And then, of course, we do have the episodes that are very specific on a topic, like Getting Control of the Gun Debate with Trevor Burrus from the Cato Institute, Jason Rink, another co-host. He was co-host early on, but he is one of the reasons this podcast keeps rolling in good audio quality. So he's a co-host in that respect too. He did a Faith and Cannabis episode. And also we talked with Carrie Baldwin, one of our regular contributors, on abortion, which probably one of the best discussions about abortion. I think Norman would,
oh my goodness,
agree.
It's so good. It's so good.
So that's episode 64. Everybody go listen to it. So yeah, I mean, it was a really good year. We had some really amazing guests on to talk about a lot of issues. And we love to hear suggestions. We do get suggestions. I would say I get one email per month, and I'm plenty happy to receive more of them on podcast guests that you would like. We have had Tom Woods on. We have a couple other big name libertarian guests that you will be pleased to know once you hear them. We haven't recorded them yet, so I can't promise anything. They're just in the schedule. So we've got a lot of great people that are joining us. So the podcast at 100, we're going to keep going. This isn't going to end, of course. We hope to have an episode 200 where we do something special for that. And so we're just really thrilled to be at this milestone.
Absolutely, and like Doug said, we do value your feedback greatly, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for your support and all of it.
Yeah. So speaking of feedback, if any of you who are joining us right now live have a question, and this will be kind of trimmed down and edited because there's a little bit of like dead air here going on at the moment, so we'll kind of trim this for the edited show. So if you want to give us any sort of like a question, if it's like an ask, you can ask Norman and Doug anything right now. It could be about LCI. It could be if you have a question that's burning a hole in your pocket. If something's burning a hole in your pocket, like money, go buy something from our store. But if it's burning a hole in your brain and you're like, I got to ask this question because I got these two guys together. I don't care. So I was just trying to sell something. That's all. If you want to say something, you're welcome to do that. And you can say something in the chat there. If not, we'll cut that whole part out and we'll end the episode.
Oh man, that kind of reminds me. I think maybe my favorite episode of okay, I'm not on every episode. I don't have quite the availability that Doug has to do this, and he's and in some cases it's better if we only have one interviewee for the show. But I think one of my favorite ones to do in the last year was when we talked about politics and theology in comic books and comic book movies. That was so fantastic and fun.
That was really good.
I also thought it was hilarious because I could tell Doug, that you were kind of you had to be thinking like, how on earth does Norman know this stuff?
You were getting it was something I learned about Norman, that he was really into comic books. And
I'm not really, and I know a lot.
Really, compared to me,
compared to you, yes,
yeah.
But it is absolutely the case that I have I have a vested interest in in understanding the genre. And so I really I really do enjoy graphic novels, and I have some interesting ones on my shelf at any given point.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I'm not really per se just into comics all the time per se, but I do enjoy graphic novels a lot. And I've tried to get a hold, and usually via the library, of some of the more important pieces in the genre.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that that we did that episode was because in 2018, I decided that, and this had become a theme in some of the things I was reading, is that the power of myth and the importance of understanding a cultural mythology, and just the importance that had on how we understand ourselves, how we understand the way we think about God, the way we think about politics and society. And so I had made it a goal in 2018 to watch all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, to watch all the films. And because Infinity War was coming out in May, it was kind of a goal to watch, to be able to watch that. Yeah. So I had a goal to watch all the movies leading up to that. And then my son and I would do it together. He's 11. And we would go see the movie. Well, I had to shorten the list because of a friend of mine told me, he's like, you're not going to get through all those. And if you don't want to get through all those, and you just, here's the one you want to see, etc. So I watched them. I did actually finish all the movies in 2018. So there's a little personal tidbit. That was my New Year's resolution for 2018, was to watch all of the Marvel movies. So set your goals high, people.
Yeah.
So you could say that my New Year's resolution was super heroic.
Oh, wow.
So anyway,
my New Year's resolution is to make more puns.
Yes. Oh, that's a given in my world.
Oh, man.
All right. We do have a question. Thank you, Larry. Have you considered the idea of promoting local LCI groups, presuming there are folks in locale that follow LCI media? Norman, this is, you know what? I'm really glad. That's part of the history of doing LCI, is that we have been on that front doing some things. Go ahead.
Yeah. Norman. And we've kind of tried that in the past. And, I'll be honest, the success of that program, if you want to call it that, has not been great. It really has everything to do with, is there someone in a particular geographic area that is really motivated to do that particular work? Because as much as we could try to support it ourselves, it really doesn't work unless you have somebody with the grit and resolve to just make it happen. And the place where, honestly, the place where we had the best success with it was when I was running our group in Austin, Texas. And it was super fun. I really encourage, look, if you've got a burning desire to do it, I will certainly talk with you about, some ideas on how to do it, but I can't do it for you. Right. And so that's something to where we will definitely, if someone has a burning desire to do it, I'll help. Try and get them started and make some suggestions. But we've kind of tried that a little bit, and it hasn't been as successful as we wanted. But it really does take time to get stuff like that really rolling. Even any group like this, even like Students for Liberty, I talked to Alexander McCoben extensively about this kind of thing. And so much of it has to do with, can you find somebody in the case of Students for Liberty, can you find a student who's willing to go the extra mile and, have the grit to get it done? Because it is a mammoth task. I've done it with I did it with Libertarian Longhorns for years. And it was just because I had a fire in my blood to just do it. And to host the conferences, to run the meetings, to do the writing, we did all sorts of cool stuff as Libertarian Longhorns, but it was because we had, a few really great people to help me out and to make that happen. Because if it had just been me, it wouldn't have worked out very well either. But we had a number of people that made it a great thing. So that's really what it takes. It takes somebody with some fire in the blood and the grit to get stuff done. But yeah, and Larry, if you want to be that guy, we'll talk, man. Let's get it done.
Yeah, one of the things that we kind of realize is that what we can do from a distance and as is become that resource. And we do have some things in the works that we hope will become tools that small groups is kind of the shorthand term that we're using it. It's like where there's a local small or medium or large group that can in some way use our material in some sort of methodical way. We haven't had any like test pilot ways of doing that yet. So we haven't had any opportunities to that. So those of you who are thinking, hey, I already have a group and I haven't even reached out. Hey, reach out to us. We'd love to help or help you in any way that we can. So we have heard people say, hey, I've got a group and we've been, kind of going through these materials. Is there any other direction you'd like that you could suggest to us? Is there something more specifically libertarian Christian? And so, we want to equip you, but as Norman said, you're going to have to carry the material to the people that are nearby you and go through it in certain ways. But hey, we are always open for supportive, to being supportive to everybody who's doing it.
Definitely.
So we are going to end the episode here. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast. If you go to the link I'm providing you, those of you who are live here, if you go to the link I'm providing you, you will see the Larry Reed video. We'll probably post this up on YouTube, or it is on YouTube. We will post it up on Facebook. Thanks for joining us again for our first live episode. We really appreciate your support, your attention, your patience in some of the technical difficulties that everyone else hearing this won't everyone else hearing this won't hear. So they were spared those things. So we had a few technical difficulties, but you were, yes, right. You suffered with us. So we consider you compatriots in our cause. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast. If you liked today's episode, we encourage you to rate us on Apple Podcasts to help expand our audience. If you want to reach out to us, email us at podcast@libertarianchristians.com. You can also reach us at LCI Official on Twitter. And of course, we are on Facebook and have an active group you are welcome to join. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Libertarian Christian Podcast is a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute, a registered 501c3 nonprofit. The audio engineers were Doug Stewart and Jason Rink, and voiceovers were by Matthew Bellis and Caitlin Horn. If you'd like to find out more about the LCI, please visit us on the web at www.libertarianchristians.com.